am here. And we are on chapter 5 of Heidi. Heidi, a classic by Johanna Spyri. A visit and another and the consequences. You know what's going to happen? I'm like, this is kind of a boring book. It's like, oh, Heidi, oh, Grandpa, you're so well. Oh, Grandma, you're so well. We love it. And I'm like, so boring. And then watch, something's going to happen. I'm going to be like, hey, why did you do that to her? I don't know. But I have a feeling. Quickly passed the winter, and still more quickly another summer, and yet another winter approached its end. Heidi was as gay and happy as the birds in the sky, and rejoiced daily in the coming of the spring, when the warm south wind would again blow through the pines and sweep away the snow, when the bright sun would coax out the blue and yellow flowers, when the days for the pasture would come, which were for the child the most beautiful days that could be imagined. She was now in her 8th year and had learned all sorts of useful things from her grandfather. She could take care of the goats, and Schwanley and Barley ran after her like faithful dogs and bleated loud for joy when they so much as heard her voice. Twice during the winter, Peter had brought a message from the schoolmaster to the Alma uncle that he should send Heidi to school. She was more than old enough, and indeed should have come the winter before. The answer returned each time was that if the schoolmaster had anything to say to him, he would always be found on the Alm. But there was no thought in his mind of sending the child to school. Peter had delivered the message correctly. Now that the March sun began to melt the snow everywhere, and the white snowdrops peeped up in the valley, and on the Alm the pines had shaken off their burden, and the boughs waved merrily in the wind once more, Heidi began to scamper back and forth with delight from the house to the stalls, then to the pines, and again into the hut to tell her grandfather how much larger the strip of green had become under the trees, for she could not wait in her impatience for the summer to cover the mountain with grass and flowers. One sunny morning, as the child was running about and had just bounded for the 10th time over the threshold, she almost fell backward for fright, for before her stood an old man all in black who gazed at her earnestly. Seeing her fear, however, he said in a kindly tone, "You must not be afraid of me, for I love children very much. Give me your hand. You must be Heidi. Where's your grandfather?" "He is sitting at the table cutting round spoons out of wood," explained the child, and opened the door wider. It was the good pastor from Dorfley, who had known the uncle long ago when he lived down below, and they had been neighbors. He now went into the hut, approached the old man, who was stooping over his work, and said, "Good morning, neighbor." The latter looked up in surprise, and rising said, "Good morning, pastor," and immediately placed his own chair for the guest, adding, "If the pastor does not object to a wooden seat, here is one for him." "It is a long time since I saw you, neighbor," said the pastor. Yes, it is long while since we met," replied the Alm uncle. "I came here today to speak to you about something," begun the pastor afresh. "I think that you already surmise what I allude to, what I wish to talk over with you, and learn your intentions about." The good man stopped and looked toward Heidi, who was now standing in the doorway, examining him with attention. "You may go to the goats, Heidi," said her grandfather. "Take a little salt with you and stay until I come." Heidi disappeared at once. "That child ought to have gone to school this year, if not a year ago," said the pastor. "The teacher sent you word to that effect, and you have not replied. What do you mean to do about it, neighbor?" "I mean not to send her to school," was the reply. The pastor stared in astonishment at the old man, who sat with folded arms upon the bench and certainly did not look like yielding. What do you mean to do for the child? He asked. Nothing. She grows and thrives with the goats and birds. With them she can learn no evil. She is safe. But she is not a goat, nor is she a bird. She is a human child. If she learns nothing evil from such company, she learns, on the other hand, nothing at all. But she should learn, and it is high time, too, that she began. I have come to warn you, neighbor, so that you can be thinking it over and making your arrangements during the summer. This must be the last season that the child passes thus, without instruction. Next winter, she must begin to go to school and go every day. I shall not do it, replied the other, unmoved. Do you mean to say that there is no way of bringing you to your senses? How can you be so obstinate in your foolishness? Said the pastor, now getting roused. You have been about a great deal and must have learned much. I thought that you had more wisdom than this neighbor. Well, replied the old man, and his voice betrayed that he was no longer quite tranquil. And does the pastor think that it really would be a wise thing for me to send such a tender child as this down the mountain every day next winter in snow and wind, a 2 hours journey, to say nothing of her coming up again every evening when we ourselves can scarcely brave it? Perhaps the pastor remembers the child's mother, Adelheid. She was delicate and had nervous attacks. Shall I let this child also become ill through overexertion? Just let someone try to force me. I will go with him before the judge to see if I can be forced. You are right, neighbor, replied the pastor in a friendly tone. It would not be possible to send the little one down to school from here. But I can see that you are fond of her, so do something for her sake that you should have done long ago. Come down into the village and live again amongst us there. What sort of life is this that you lead up here in bitterness with God and man? If anything should happen to you here in the winter, how could any help reach you? I cannot even understand how you can manage to get through the winter with this tender child without freezing. The child has young blood and good clothing. This much I can tell you. And this too, that I know where to get wood and the best time to fetch it. If the pastor pleases, he can look into my shed. There is plenty of fuel there. On my heart, the fire never goes out all winter. What the pastor proposes about moving down into the village will not suit me. The people down there despise me and I them. We must remain apart, so is it best for all. No, it is not good for you. I know what is lacking with you, though, said the pastor earnestly. As for the contempt of the village people, what does that amount to? Believe me, neighbor, seek to make your peace with God. Ask his forgiveness in whatever way you need it, and then come and see how differently men will regard you and how pleasant it will be for you. The good man now stood up. He held out his hand to the uncle and continued cordially. I shall count upon it for next winter to have you again amongst us. We are good old neighbors, and it would be very disagreeable to me to have any force used towards you. So give me your hand upon it that you will come back and live with us again at peace with God and man. The uncle gave his hand to the pastor, but said so decidedly, I know that the pastor feels kindly to me, but I shall not do as he wishes. I say it plainly, without circumlocution. I shall neither send the child to school nor come myself. So may God help you, said the pastor sadly, and passed out of the door and down the mountain. The old man was out of humor, and when Heidi said, Now shall we go to the grandmother, he answers, Not today, and did not speak again the whole day long. The next morning, when the child said, Today shall we go to the grandmother, he was very short with her in word and tone, answering only, We'll see. But before there was time to clear the table after dinner came another visitor. It was no other than Deet. She had a fine hat with a feather and a dress that swept up everything in its path, and in the mountain cottage all sorts of things lay on the floor that might have soiled a nice dress. The uncle looked at her from head to foot, but did not speak. Deet, however, had the intention of making herself very agreeable, and began at once to praise what she saw, saying that Heidi looked wonderfully well, that she should hardly have recognized the child, that it was plain that the grandfather had cared well for her. She decided that she had always meant to take the child back again, for she fully understood that it must be very inconvenient for him to have the charge of her. But there had never been a time, day or night, when she had been able to come for her or even to bring her anything. Today she came because she had just heard of something that might be of such advantage to Heidi that she herself could scarcely believe it possible. She had looked well into it at once, and now she could safely say that such a piece of luck rarely happens, perhaps once in 1,000 times, to anyone. Very rich relations of the family with whom she lived, who owned almost the handsomest house in Frankfurt, had only one daughter who was ill and obliged to remain all the time in a rolling chair because she was paralyzed on one side. This girl was almost always alone and had to study alone with her teachers, which was tedious for her. It was thought desirable to find a companion for her to live in the house. Deet had learned all this, she said, from the family with whom she lived, and they wanted to find the child. When Deet heard the description of what they wanted, the housekeeper said she must be a perfectly unspoiled little girl, unlike all other children. She thought at once of Heidi. So went to the lady and told her about the little niece and gave the child such a good character. The lady agreed at once that she was just what she wished for. Nobody could realize, said Deet, what was in store for Heidi. Such luck, such comfort. And when she once came to live with these people, she would have everything that the daughter had, and no one could tell the daughter was so delicate if the family should be left without a child. What wonderful pieces of luck. Have you almost finished? Said the grandfather, who thus had not spoken a word. Pa, said Deet, and threw back her head. You behave exactly as I had brought you a commonplace piece of news, and there is not all Prodigal a single person who would not have thanked God for such tidings as I have just given you. Take them then where you choose. I'll have none of them, said the old man dryly. At these words off went Deet's tongue like skyrockets. Well, if such is your opinion, I will tell you then, uncle, what I think. That this child is now 8 years old and knows nothing and can do nothing, and you will not let her learn, nor send her to school, nor to church. They told me down in Dorfleet, she is my only sister's child, and I must be responsible for her and what happens to her. And when such a chance falls to a child's share as this, there can be but one opinion about it, for no one has any particular interest in her, and no one feels disposed to do anything for her. I will not yield, that I tell you plainly, for I have everybody on my side. There is not one single person down in Dorfleet who will not help me assist you. Will not help me against you. And if you wish to come before the court, though you'd better think twice of that, there are things that can be brought up against you that you will not care to hear. When once an affair is brought before a court, much is raked up that has almost been forgotten. Hold your tongue, thundered the old man, and his eyes flashed fire. Take the child and ruin her, but never let me see her with such a hat and feather on her head, and such words in her mouth as you have used today. And with great strides he went out of the house. You have made my grandfather angry, said Heidi, her sparkling eyes showing an expression that was far from friendly toward Deet. Oh, he will soon be all tight again. Come along now. Where are your clothes, child? I am not going, said Heidi. What did you say, said Deet. Then, changing her tone a little, she continued half in a friendly, half in angry fashion. Come, come, you do not know what you are talking about. It will be far pleasanter for you there than you can even imagine. She went to the press and took out Heidi's things and packed them together. Come now, get your hat. It does not look very nice, I must say, but it will pass for the present. Put it on and let us get off. I am not going, repeated Heidi. Do not be stupid and obstinate like a goat. You must have learned it from them. Think a little, child. Your grandfather is angry. You saw that yourself. You heard him tell us not to come before his eyes again. He is quite determined that you shall go with me. Do not anger him still more. You have no idea how delightful it is in Frankfurt, nor what you will see there. And if you don't like it, you can come back here again, and by that time your grandfather will have recovered his temper. Can I turn right about and come home this evening? What? Come along now. Did I tell you that you could come back whenever you wished? Today we go as far as Mayenfeld, and early tomorrow morning we take our places in the railway. And in that you can come back. Let's see where we are here with this. Okay. And in that you can come back here in a twinkling. It is like flying. Aunt Deet has taken the little girl's hand in hers, and with the bundle on her arm, they went down the mountainside together. As it was not quite time to take the goats to pasture, Peter still went to school in Dorfli, or rather should have gone, but he now and then took a holiday, for he thought, it is not the least use for me to go to school. I cannot learn to read, and to go about a little searching for big sticks is of use, for they can be burned. So it happened that he was in the neighborhood of the cottage with most unmistakable evidence of his day's occupation on his shoulder, for he carried an enormous bundle of sticks of hazelwood. He stood still and stared at the pair as they came toward him. When they drew near, he said, "Where are you going?" I must go straight to Frankfurt with Aunt Deet, said Heidi, but first I will run to see the grandmother. Run in to see the grandmother. No, stopping to talk. No stopping to talk. It is already too late, said Deet anxiously, and held a child who was already hastening away, fast by the hand. You can come back again to see her soon, but now come with me. And she drew Heidi quickly along and did not release her again. She was afraid that it might again come into the child's head not to go with her, and that the grandmother might also induce her to remain. And to his cottage went Peter at one leap and flung his whole bundle of sticks down on the table with such violence that everything quivered, and his grandmother started from her spinning and cried aloud. Peter had to give vent to his feelings. What is the matter? What happened? Asked the old woman, and his mother, who had been sitting quietly at the table, almost flew into the air at the noise, crying, What is it, Peterkin? Why are you so wild? Because she has taken Heidi away with her, exclaimed Peter. Who? Where, Peterkin? Cried the grandmother. She must have soon guessed what had happened, however, for Brigitte had told her a little while before that she had seen Deet going up the mountain to the Elm uncle's. Trembling all over with haste, the old woman opened the window and called beseechingly, Deet, do not take the child away. Do not carry Heidi off. The fugitives were still within sound of her voice, and Deet must have heard perfectly what she said, for she held the child faster and increased her speed to a run. Heidi resisted, saying, The grandmother is calling me. I must go. Now Deet forced Heidi along, lest they should not be in time to take the train for Frankfurt, she said, and once there, Heidi would not want to return, but if she did, there might be something to bring to the grandmother that the old woman would like. This idea pleased the little girl, and she began to run of her own accord. What can I bring the grandmother? She asked after a while. Something good, said Deet. some beautiful soft white bread, for she can scarcely eat the hard black bread. That would be nice for her. Yes, yes. She always gives it to Peter and says it is too hard for her. I have often seen her do that. Let us go quick, Aunt Deet, and perhaps we can get to Frankfurt today so that I can come back at once with the white bread. And now it was Heidi who urged her aunt along and ran so quickly that Deet found it hard to follow with the bundle. But she was glad to hasten, for they were near to the first houses in Dorfli, and there might begin a new set of questions and remonstrances that would bring Heidi again to another mind. Just making sure everything's going. Are you taking her with you? Are you running away from the elm uncle? It is a miracle that the child is living, and so rosy-cheeked too. Such remarks reached her from all sides, and she was glad that she could get off without hindrance and not be obliged to give explanations. Also, that Heidi spoke not a word, but urged forward in the greatest haste. From this day forward, the alm uncle looked more and more wicked. When he chanced to be in Dorfli, he spoke to no one and looked so repulsive that the women said to the little children, "Take care, get out of his way, or the elm uncle will harm you." The old man held no intercourse with anyone in Dorfli, but went through the little town and deep down into the valley, where he exchanged his goat cheese for provisions of bread and meat. When he passed through Dorfli, the people gathered together in little groups behind his back, and each one had something strange to tell about the old man. He looked wilder and wilder, and how he never even exchanged a greeting with anybody. All agreed it was very fortunate that the child had escaped, for it was easy to see that the little one ran as if afraid that the grandfather was pursuing her to carry her back. Only the blind grandmother stood up for him always, and whoever came to her cottage to bring her stuff to spin or to take away something that she had done for them were told how good and careful the alm uncle had been with the child, and how he had worked on her cottage for many an afternoon and had mended it and made it safe, or it would certainly have fallen into pieces long ago. The information had come also down to Dorfli, but most of those who heard it said that the grandfather was too old to understand rightly, for she probably did not hear the grandmother was too old to understand rightly, for she probably did not hear very well, just as she could no longer see. At any rate, the alm uncle never appeared again at the goatherd's cottage, but it was true that he had mended it very thoroughly, for it held together for a long time and was perfectly safe. So there's the grandmother. How sad. How sad to just fool a little child, isn't it? Chapter 6, a new chapter and altogether new things. All right, folks. This has been the reading room. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We are reading the classic story, Heidi, by Johanna Spyri. Thanks so much for joining me with Healthy Mind, Body, Spirit. Thanks.